Well, welcome to Mackinac Island as we've got baseball for you tonight. The Fort Mackinac Never Sweats taking on the Portland Blue Sox. I'm Tom Helmer along with Marcus Dixon. And in what has been an odd year, we're going to go back in time to the 1860s and play some baseball.
We are. We're going to be seeing some baseball played by the rules of 1860. And this is really going to be a classic American community game. Two clubs that are playing for the honor of their towns, using some old rules and just having a good time.
With that, let's get it down to the field and our umpire, Cow Pie, as we get set for the national anthem.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now ask you all to rise. Gentlemen, please remove your hats. We invite you now to listen to Andrew Quinn, one of Mackinac Island's as he plays the Star Spangled Banner.
And with that, we're ready for baseball. Now, if you think you know the game of baseball, you're definitely going to learn some new things today. We're going to play by 1860s era rules. One of the things I might notice, pitching underhand. The thing with the game back in the day was they wanted as much action as possible.
Well, it's absolutely true. This was a game that was for sport and exercise, and at this point in history, the game was required to be played by amateurs. The professional game is still 9 years in the future, and so this was a community event for people to come out and play together, especially as we're going to see today. There were clubs in New York that were sort of building into powerhouses, but out here in the Midwest, this was a community day.
Now, you may think that Fort Mackinac is out in the field because they are the home team. Not necessarily true. Back in the day, it was done by a coin toss. They had it earlier. Fort Mackinac won the coin toss, decided to be in the field first, so the Portland Blue Sox will bat first.
Yeah, at the time, there were different strategies that you might use, and one club would challenge another club to a game, and the club that was challenged, you played on their field, and the club that did the challenging would provide the ball. The ball could vary a lot, so they made the decision to take the field here, and there was some strategy behind that.
And you'll notice, too, as you watch them warm up, no gloves. They play barehanded. Now, the ball is a little bit softer than the baseball you're used to now, but not much. Daddy Hacks is going to lead things off here for Portland.
And the ball is a little bit larger. At this point in history, it can be 9 3/4 up to 10 inches in circumference, and 5 3/4 up to 6 ounces.
There's a grounder to short, throw to first. Can't hang on to it. Now, usually you're not allowed to run through first base in vintage rules here, 1860, but because of some of the players' athletic ability, if you will, they're letting them run through first base today.
That's right. That idea of overrunning first hasn't been invented yet in 1860. But like I said, this is a community game. We're going to do a few things that aren't quite the way the rules might have laid them out, but it's for the enjoyment of the people who are here playing and watching.
It is windy conditions here on the island. We're on Mackinac Island, wedged in between the lower and upper peninsulas here in the state of Michigan. There's a high bounce. That'll be a base hit.
That is, in fact, an out.
That's true. I've got to remember the old rules. One hop and a catch is an out, so that's actually the first out of the game. But Daddy Hacks advances to second on the play, so we've got one out, one on.
That's right. Now, if the ball had been caught on the fly, then like today, the runner would have had to tag up before he could advance. But because that out was made on a bound catch, as it was called, he's allowed to run.
I didn't even make it through the top of the first before I made my first rule mistake.
Well, those rules were changing almost every year in the 1860s. You know, if we were to say today, let's play baseball the way we did in 2018, it wouldn't be too different. But if we were to say that about, you know, 1858 or 1862, it would be different. Now, this was an out because the striker barely tipped the ball. He fouled it. It bounced behind the home base, and the catcher caught it. So that was a foul ball caught on one bounce for an out, for 2 outs.
A lucky lefty. This one out to center. That one drops. A run's going to score, and Portland is on the board and makes it a 1-0 ball game here. So they're putting a little rally together here with 2 outs. So that was actually Shoeless with the hit. They flipped the order. Lucky lefty coming up now for Portland. Runner on first. High fly ball back behind second base. There's the hop, but he can't get it off the hop. So the runners will advance, and now Portland's got runners at first and second.
It's a tricky strategy with trying to play the bounce or the bound. The ball has an awful lot of rubber in it. The field isn't level, and you don't have a glove. And so trying to make the decision about how to field it is a tricky thing.
That'll bring up pork rind. High fly ball to second. That one is caught on the fly. So Portland able to get a run across in the first inning. And now it'll be Fort Mackinac coming up to bat here in the bottom of the first. They're going to play 7 innings in this ball game, in part because the last ferry off the island tonight is 9 o'clock, and some of these players have to get off the island.
That's absolutely right. And so this is an example of how, as a community game, we might adjust the rules a little bit here and there. If this were what was called a match game, a game that was to count in your records, then we would be a lot more attentive to all of those details. But here, we're wanting this to be an enjoyable exercise for all of the people here. And if that means making sure they get home, we'll make sure they get home.
Fort Mackinac will step up in the bottom of the first. Craig Bunker, the third baseman, will get ready to lead things off. We got a 1-0 ball game. Tom Helmer and Marcus Dixon with you here on Mackinac Island. It's a really quite a beautiful evening with the breeze coming in from right field. Rained earlier in the day for a couple hours, but the clouds parted, and it's a beautiful night for baseball here on the island. And this ball field has been in use, as near as we can tell, from at least the 1880s.
Yeah, even into the 1870s, I believe they said that. And this is the field that was played actually in this configuration with the home base where it is, laid out this way since the 1870s, and the 23rd Infantry played here as the Never Sweats back in 1885. So they believe this to be the oldest continuously used baseball field in the state of Michigan.
There's a ground ball to third, taking off a couple hops. Throw to first a little high, and it is dropped. Well, you've got Giant over there at first base, and he stands probably about 6'8". He is a mountain of a man, but he couldn't hang on to the baseball, and it's tough when you're playing barehanded.
It absolutely is. That ball can come right off of your hands. And the most common injuries are really finger injuries. They're broken, jammed fingers, fingernails being torn off, and then probably leg injuries, and things like hamstring pulls, with, like you mentioned, not being able to overrun first base.
Well, they'll call that a foul ball. Now, one of the things you'll learn by watching vintage baseball is it matters where the ball hits first. If it hops in fair ground and rolls out before it got to third base, it's still a fair ball.
That's right. That's right. Now, on this case, the rule is that the defense can actually try to put that runner out on a foul ball. Unlike today, where a runner would get a free back, the defense can, if they can get the ball to the pitcher and then to the base the runner left from, that runner would be out. But in this case, the call was a little bit late, and so in a gentlemanly fashion, they allowed the runner to return to first without trying to make a play on him.
And that one hit foul. Got a piece of it.
Okay, and again, we had a little bit of a late call there. Now, a ball that goes straight down, here's a tricky thing. The lines, the foul lines come in and meet in the middle of home base, that round plate. That means that the front part of home base is fair,
Well, nice catch out there in left field for the first out.
We might say that was well held.
And it was. So there's one out, a runner at first. Tyler McLean, the left fielder, coming up now for the Fort Mackinac Never Sweats. It's a 1-0 game here in the bottom of the first. Portland leads. There's one hit hard to left field. Now there's really no boundary, so they're going to play this one all the way. He's coming around third. He's going to head home, and that's going to end up scoring 2 runs on the play as the throw in is overshot and hits the backstop. And with that, Fort Mackinac now has a 2-1 lead.
We call that a clean home run. A home run that was, the runner went from home to home without any errors. In a game like this, you might imagine that there are home runs that included errors. But that is a clean home run.
Oh, Ken Fegan will come up now, trying to add on to what the Never Sweats have going here in the first. High fly ball down the left field line. That'll bounce once and then be caught for the out. So we've got 2 away here in the bottom of the first. And Dominic Miller, the second baseman, will step to the dish. Now there are no balls in this game.
So here in 1860, strikes have been put into the rules, called strikes. Called balls won't come around for 4 more years. But in reality, the umpires just didn't quite understand the rule, and the players didn't either. So it was really rare that an umpire would call a strike unless a player just stood there for a long, long time without taking a cut. And occasionally you'd see that. There are some accounts of players doing what was called playing into the dark, where they would take 80 pitches, hoping it would get dark and the game would end and their team would win because they were ahead.
Well, the first inning is in the books. Fort Mackinac with a 2-1 lead over Portland. Portland will be coming up here in the top of the second. You're watching vintage baseball here on Mackinac Island. All right, welcome back as we get ready for second inning action. The Fort Mackinac Never Sweats taking on the Portland Blue Sox. It's a 2-1 ball game after 1 inning. Tyler McLean hit a 2-run homer to left to give Fort Mackinac the lead, and here comes Giant. He is 6'9", plays first base for Portland. He is a mountain of a man.
Now, if you see that he was just holding his bat out, he was showing the pitcher where he wants the ball. The rule requires that the pitcher pitch, quote, for the striker, which means the striker can say, I'd like one about here. The pitcher has to do his best to put it where he wanted it. So he's not required to be nice about it. He could do it fast or slow, do a rise ball or a drop ball, but and however he wanted to do it. But he has to put it close to where the striker asked for it. We don't have a concept of a strike zone yet.
Well, he smoked one up the middle there. Nice play made by the middle infield, and there's one away here, and that'll bring up Jeter. I asked Giant, I said, do you play first base because you're 6'9"? He goes, no, I play first base because I can't really throw the ball anymore. But also because I'm 6'9".
Right. That kind of wingspan is good to have at first base.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this game played in the 1860s era is they wanted action. It was for exercise. It was for fun. They wanted as much action as possible.
That's right. It was not a game where we were focused on trying to take ungentlemanly advantage of your opponent. And they were trying to make sure that people got exercise and they had enjoyment.
Well, Jeter with a double down the right field line. Now, the only really rule as far as the landscape out here is there's a huge row of trees down the first base line. When the ball goes into those trees, that is automatically a ground rule double. Now, the trees out in right field, the tree in center field, they would still have to play it. But because the trees are closer down the first base line, they're going to go ahead and call that a ground rule double. So Jeter's at second. There's one away, and the old coach coming up to the plate here.
That's a long
I love the nicknames.
Yeah, a lot of these players in vintage baseball do have nicknames. Nicknames were certainly existed in the 1860s. Not everybody had one, but a lot of players in vintage baseball choose to have them. It's a good, comradeship building thing, and I think people enjoy that, and they try to have things that are historically appropriate a lot of times.
There's a fly ball towards short. That one caught on the fly, and now there's 2 away.
One of the clubs in Ohio, the Canal Fulton Mules, represent a club of canalers. They were people who, pulled the canals with their mules. And whenever they play at a place that has a train, they'll turn and spit on the ground because the train took their livelihood away. And they'll talk about how horrible that is. So they really try to represent the era in which their teams played. Most vintage teams are actually based on real teams that existed in the 1800s.
Well, that pitch inside. It's a 2-1 ball game. Fort Mackinac on top. We're in the top of the second inning. Tom Helmer and Marcus Dixon with you here on Mackinac Island in the great state of Michigan. There's a fly ball to shallow left center. That'll bounce and then be caught for the out. So Portland was able to push a run across in the top of the first. Can't do so in the second, so it's still a 2-1 game as we get set to move to the bottom of the second inning.
So just to talk about these two clubs for a moment, the Blue Sox are in their second year of existence. I had the honor of umpiring their very first game last year, which was at the sesquicentennial for Portland, Michigan. And so this is a club that's just gearing up into vintage baseball. The Never Sweats here are in their 18th year of playing here on Mackinac Island. And they are based on a club, as I said, that existed, the 23rd Infantry. And was told today that their uniform is actually, it's a little more of an 1880s uniform. Both clubs with the knickers are really more 1880s style uniforms. But they have photographic evidence of that being the Mackinac Never Sweats uniform from the 1880s of members of the club down on the pier.
So much fantastic history here on the island. And as we said, this baseball field, they've been playing baseball up here since at least 1871. And we're ready to start things off here in the bottom of the second inning. Phil Porter getting things started here for Fort Mackinac. Hard grounder down the third baseline. It's a fair ball. He will round first and head towards second base. And he's in with a double. I would say a stand-up double, but sliding's not allowed anyway.
Well, it's not against the rules, but it's uncommon. It certainly didn't exist as a strategy. The idea of throwing yourself on the ground, really didn't exist. If it did happen, it would have been, I'm running towards the base, oh my goodness, he has the ball, I should fall on the ground and try to avoid it, rather than any kind of a strategy.
Bart Stupak up now with a runner at second. It's a 2-1 game. Fort Mackinac on top.
You might recognize that name, Bart Stupak, former congressman from Michigan.
There's one down the left field line. One hop and caught for the out. But the runner will advance to third. So the Never Sweats with a runner at third and a chance to add on to their one-run lead.
At the plate, John Hiller.
Now here comes John Hiller. If you're a baseball fan, you know that name. There's a line to left. That one is caught. For the out, there's 2 away. John Hiller, pitcher for the '68 Tigers.
And huge fan of this game of vintage baseball. Been with the Never Sweats for years.
There's a fly ball towards second base. That one caught on the fly. So Fort Mackinac threatens here in the bottom of the second, but can't get a run across. We'll take a break. When we come back, it'll be Portland back to the plate, trailing in this one 2-1 as we head to the top of the third. Welcome back as we get set for action here in the top of the third between the Fort Mackinac Never Sweats and the Portland Blue Sox. Tom Helmer and Marcus Dixon with you. This is Vintage Baseball on Mackinac Island. here in the beautiful state of Michigan. It's the man they call Barney. Hard ground ball to second base, off the knee, throw from short, that one caught, and there's one away. So not your typical out, but alertness gets it done. 4-6-3 if you want to score that one at home on the out. So Daddy Hacks up to the plate here.
So the catcher went for that one, hoping to pick that up on the bounce, and wasn't able to grab it.
So he stays alive here in the at-bat.
People ask about the underhand pitching, and I say, well, think about that word pitch. What else do we pitch? We pitch hay. How do you pitch hay? Underhanded. You pitch horseshoes. How do you pitch horseshoes? Underhanded. In the 1800s, that word pitch meant an underhanded delivery. The thing that pitchers do today was called a throw. An overhanded delivery with the arm bent was called a throw. And if you are to throw the ball, that would be a balk.
Interesting.
Yeah. So over the years, I think we can all agree that pitchers cheat. And so over the years, pitchers cheated a little bit and began to push the boundaries of what was acceptable. They went through a whole series of rules changes. At one point, they said pitchers can deliver sidearm as long as it's below your belt. Pitchers immediately began wearing pants with belts up around the ribs.
Everybody's always looking for an edge,
Looking
aren't they?
for that advantage. So finally in 1884 in the National League, they gave up and said, do whatever you want, and went full overhand.
This one hit hard to right field. It'll take a bounce and be caught for the out. So a quick 1-2-3 in the top of the third. We'll move to the bottom of the second. It is still a 2-1 game. Both teams have done all their scoring in the first inning. Fort Mackinac with the lead right now. And it's interesting, when you hear them talk about baseball and no gloves and a hard ball, you think, boy, it's going to be hard to get outs. You think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but actually it's played a little tighter than you would think.
It really can be. Now, it varies a lot. You'd still expect to see runs. And, like we said, this is a community game. It's a lot of folks just out having a great day playing ball. In some of the clubs you'd see in the bigger cities, you'd see really advanced play. And you might see some higher scores. Now, what especially happened was when you saw, like, one of the great clubs, for example, the National Baseball Club of Washington went through the Midwest in 1867, and they won by scores of like 110-4. Because they were playing at just a different level.
Right.
And at the time, nobody said, oh my goodness, they're running up the score. They said, these people are showing us how the game ought to be played. They're giving us a lesson on how the game can be played.
Well, Todd Callowart has called the striker to the dish. Look, Cow Pie out there talking to the audience right now. His name's John Soma. He goes by the nickname Cow Pie. He is our umpire for tonight's game. I said, how did you get that nickname? And he said when he was playing his first vintage baseball game, they were talking about how they played in cow pastures. And he goes, oh, were they out there stepping in cow pies? And someone goes, you just earned yourself a nickname.
It can be dangerous in this game about how you get your
Don't
nicknames.
talk.
Yeah. On the club I've played for, they've always said if you don't get a name, if you don't identify your own nickname soon, they're going to go with bedwetter. So people generally get to a nickname
Jump
pretty
on something
quickly.
quick,
Yeah.
right. Oh, we got Pork Rind out here. His kids gave him that nickname. They said, Dad, you're big. Go with Pork Rind. Now these pitches coming up short of the dish. As we said, there's no balls in this game. The object is to try and get it where the batter wants to hit it, and the batter goes up with the intention of trying to put it in play as quick as possible. That was a one-hopper back to the mound, so that'll be an out. There's one away here in the bottom of the third.
So there are strikes were first put into the rules in 1858. So like I said, they've been in for a couple of years, but people still didn't really understand them. They didn't call them very much. Balls are going to come in 1864, just a few years from now. And then in 1865, the biggest change is going to come, and that is that fair balls will be required to be caught on the fly for an out. There was a lot of debate and controversy, even going back to the late 1850s over that, and finally, in the midst of the Civil War, when they had the National Association of Baseball Players Convention, not many people showed up that year, and they were able to push through the change in the rules to require that to require that the ball be caught on the fly in fair territory
Well,
for
there-
1865.
There you saw a one hopper to third. Again, that's an out. If you can play it off one bounce and catch it, that's an out. Clay Fuller, the catcher, and that's a single through the left side. So Fort Mackinac has a base runner here in the bottom of the third. They lead this ball game 2-1. And that'll bring up Craig Bunker, the leadoff hitter, third baseman. Wind blowing in from right field. Beautiful evening, though. And this one, they'll call a foul. But, you know, what's interesting, that almost hit fair and then went foul. If it had, that ball would be in play.
That ball would have been fair. And later on, that really became a strategy called a fair foul hit, where you would try, especially if you could get an outside pitch and reach out on it, you could bring it down the line, third base line for a right-hand hitter, just inside the fair territory, and it would roll out and often be played by the left fielder. So it wasn't that you were chop bunting it, it would go pretty deep.
That's one hopper and caught. That'll be an out. So though it was in foul territory because of the hop and the catch, it's an out. And we've played 3 full innings here on Mackinac Island. Fort Mackinac with a 2-1 lead. We'll take a break and use this opportunity for station identification. Welcome back as we get set for the top of the 4th inning. Fort Mackinac leading the Portland Blue Sox 2-1. It is vintage baseball. Tom Helmer and Marcus Dixon with you here. Out at Fort Mackinac, a field they have used since the 1800s to play baseball. Classic leading things off. Struck out back in the first inning. But not your classic strikeout.
Yeah, it was a foul out, you know, where he swung and tipped it right to the catcher. You know, a one bounce foul.
All the scoring happened in the first inning. Portland scored right away, made it a 1-0 game. Fort Mackinac responded with 2 in the bottom of the first. Tyler McLean hit a 2-run homer to left field, an absolute blast. There's a swing and a miss for Classic.
Now, so there's only one strike now because foul balls are not strikes. So even though he fouled one back just a moment ago, there's only one strike because only one swing and miss.
Well, you know he's feeling the pressure, too. He does not want to strike out.
That is right.
Popped it up towards second base. That one is dropped. They'll flip it over to first, though, and get the out.
Make the play.
He felt sure it was going to be caught, so he was kind of jogging down the first baseline.
And in this game with a ball with a lot of rubber in it and no gloves, you never want to assume that ball's going to get caught.
Well, that'll bring up Shoeless. One away here, top of the 4th.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, now we're seeing underhand. We talked about the underhand pitching earlier
Yep.
in the broadcast, and it kind of resembles a bit of a softball game. That one down the left field line, that'll bounce but not be caught. It was a walkway over there that gave it a high bounce. But the pitching underhand, even in the 1860s, would be faster than what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so baseball, the rules that we play today are really referred to as the New York rules. There were a whole bunch of games that had bats and balls and things like that. And the rules that were established in New York, they're really credited to the Knickerbocker Club. They're the ones that took over and became the most popular. And even by 1858, you'll see in the newspapers where they talk about pitchers pitching with exceeding velocity. Now, those are major clubs that they existed to play baseball, and it was their game accounts were in the newspapers every week, and they were followed all over the country in a lot of cases. This is a community game, and so it's much less oriented in that way. Now, that was finely held ball.
And I actually talked to you a little earlier about the strategy of it too, with that fly ball to left. You don't have to catch it in the air. Do you want to play the bounce? Now the thing is, as we saw one earlier in the game down the right field line, if it hits a little pothole or a rock or something, it's going to get away from you. So you got to make a decision on that fly ball.
Exactly. And Henry Chadwick was the best-known sports writer of the day, and he hated the rule about bound catches, and he wrote that catching a ball on the bound is a feat of which no 10-year-old should be proud. And so he argued against that rule for many years. Now, often you'll see a bound catch that the player is running and makes a wonderful play.
Yeah.
But when a player just stands and lets it bounce and then makes an easy catch, that doesn't strike you as manly. It doesn't strike you as what people would have wanted in that era.
Right, right. Well, Lucky Lefty was not lucky as he popped out, so we're going to the bottom of the fourth. It is still a 2-1 game.
This is a particularly low-scoring game. A lot of the games would have been very common for a game of this era to end up 22-17. That would be a normal type of score. But you know, like we said, this is playing for fun and exercise and enjoyment, and people are really not that concerned about the score. They're more concerned about these two towns getting together and enjoying each other's company.
Boy, you talk about pace of play. They've been playing for about 35 minutes, maybe a little less. They're already in the bottom of the fourth inning. The game moves along, and that's what I think fans enjoyed so much about it too, is that the entire goal of this type of baseball was action.
Yeah, it's interesting. At the time, cricket was also very popular in the United States, and many people said that one of the reasons baseball overtook cricket was because it was a game of constant action. Now, people today might disagree with that, but it was seen as a game of constant action and more suited to the American temperament.
Well, that one bounced and caught, so there is one away here in the bottom of the fourth. Now, would you call it a batter in the 1860s, or would you just call him a striker?
It was usually called a striker. Occasionally, you might see the word batsman. And batter really came in the late 1880s, so in the future a little bit. Now, it's interesting, you know, 1880s is still, you know, 140 years ago.
Right, right.
So it might seem a little nitpicky, but at this point, the rules would always refer to him as the striker or occasionally the batsman. And the players would have been referred to as ballists.
Well, another great catch by Porkrind out in left field as he hauls that one in.
It's finally held.
And it is a quick inning again. Still, we've had 3 straight scoreless innings. The score still 2-1 here as we take a break. Fort Mackinac on top of the Portland Blue Sox. Welcome back as we get set for the top of the 5th inning. Fort Mackinac Never Sweats playing host to the Portland Blue Sox. The Never Sweats with a 2-1 lead here as we start action in the top of the 5th. Porkrind with a ground ball up the middle for a hit. So Portland will start things off here in the 5th with a single.
So let me talk for just a second about the field. You'll see home base is round. It's not yet called home plate, really called home base. It's round. It's usually a steel plate. Occasionally it would be marble. And the bases are 90-feet bases, and they needed to be made out of something and stuffed with something like horsehair or cotton. They needed to be fluffy because there was only one umpire, and he needed to be able to see them from a long distance away. They needed to be kind of thick so the umpire could see them. The pitcher is 45 feet away, and he's at, there's a plate in the ground. It's called the pitcher's point that marks
nice catch down
catch.
the third baseline. And he had to navigate the flagpole as well. Sized it up, looked back. Giant had hit it high down the third baseline. And a wonderful, wonderful catch for the first out here in the top of the 5th.
Now imagine the ball had hit that flagpole. That would usually have been considered to have bounced. They consider a tree or a flagpole like that, that's considered the ground. So even though it was foul, that meant he would have had to catch it in the air. He couldn't have let it bounce again because once it hit the flagpole, it would have been considered to have bounced.
Well, there was a bounce and a catch. And Porkrind moves up to second base. And even still, you could tell, I mean, we're talking 1860s, 1870s, 1880s.
Right.
It's 2020. Still, you're like, is this going to be a sac fly? Can I advance?
Right.
Even some, there's a little bit of a stutter step there. Can I really advance on this out?
Exactly, because he wasn't sure whether it was going to be caught or not. And if it was caught, he would have had to return and could have been out the same way as he would be out today on a tag up.
Old Coach with a ground ball to third, over to first. That one caught. So another strong defensive inning by Fort Mackinac in the top of the fifth as they hold Portland scoreless for the fourth straight inning. It is still a 2-1 game as we get set to move to the bottom of the fifth. They're planning on playing 7 innings in part because they realize the last ferry leaves the island here at 9 o'clock. But with the pace of play here, they've moved right along. They've played maybe 40 minutes here, and you've got 4.5 innings of baseball,
right.
Which is exactly what this type of game was for.
Absolutely.
Lots of action.
A lot of action. Constantly moving.
As you look at the uniforms too, Portland with the white with the P on the shirt, and you look at Fort Mackinac, that is, as near as we can tell, is the uniforms. Those look like what they would have worn circa 1880.
1880s, right. So the knickers especially didn't come into play until really the early 1870s. The great Cincinnati Red Stockings club that went undefeated in 1869, led by George and Harry Wright, they really brought in a lot of innovations, and one of those was the knickers. And then a whole lot of things around, like we mentioned,
because
sliding
before
earlier.
It was just pants?
Would have been long pants, absolutely. And oftentimes you would have had like a shield on the front of the uniform. Like they were often based on like a fireman's uniform, a fireman's shield of the era. And so this really does represent more of an late 1870s, 1880s style uniform with the knickers and the big letters on the front. But it's things that we can document being related to these communities.
And the ball caps haven't changed a lot.
They really haven't. In fact, if you look at these and you think about the Pirates, with their flat top hats, they're really based on that same style of cap. Now, the early club in the 1850s, you would have seen clubs. That was. Did you see that bound catch?
I mean, do you want bad luck or not? You talk about the bounce. The ball was well struck, if you will, and took this low trajectory bounce, but. It's just been a great effort out in left field.
Looks like it hit a little divot in the field there. But yeah, he made a fine catch there.
So 1 away now. All the scoring done in the first inning, but here we got a sharp one down the third base line, and they're going to call that one foul. Boy, he absolutely ripped that one. It's kind of a bit of a wasted effort, when you get geared up for your at-bat and
that's right.
You rip one and you take out of the batter's box. Would they have called it the batter's box in that day?
No, there's really not a box. Now, there was often a line that ran through home base. And just a single line, it went, and it would be parallel with the line from first and third base. It was called the striker's line, and the striker was required to stand on that. They wanted to be sure that the striker didn't run forward into the field to get more momentum on the hit, or when they were playing with a lot of more swift pitching, jump back a few feet to get a little bit more time to look at the ball. So that line required you to straddle or stand on the line, but there wasn't a box then. It would have been just the striker's line.
As we mentioned before, you could make as many rules as you want. Then the player is going to find out some way to give himself an advantage in the whole thing.
That is absolutely true. One of the things that we're not seeing a lot of today, I mentioned the pitcher 45 feet away, and there's a pitcher's point there, a steel plate to mark it. But there would have been a line. So think about the pitcher's rubber today. It's 2 feet across. The line here would have been 4 yards. And the pitcher could pitch from anywhere along those 12 feet, so you could get a very sharp angle. In terms of how you were pitching to a given hitter, and you could move at any point during the striker's time at bat.
Well, that's a fair one, but this one's going to be thrown into the crowd, so he'll move on to second base. Well, they gathered it, got his feet underneath him, and then as he went to make the throw, the ball just sailed on him. And the people that have been able to grab a little bit of real estate in the front row along the grass had to scurry for cover.
So because we've got our spectators a little bit close in, we've actually said that an overthrow will be one base here. Now what would have happened by rule is that because a spectator held that ball, the runners could have kept running until the defense was able to get the ball to the pitcher and then get the ball to make a play.
Okay.
So when we say a dead ball, it doesn't mean what it means today.
Right.
Then a dead ball meant this ball is dead and can't be used to put somebody out until it's made live by being held by the pitcher.
Well, runner at third, 2 outs. There's a ground ball to short. Flips it over to first. Giant makes the catch. And Fort Mackinac threatens, but they can't push a run across. We've got 5 in the books. Fort Mackinac leading the Portland Blue Sox by a score of 2-1. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back as we get set for the top of the 6th inning. Tom Helmer and Marcus Dixon with you here at Fort Mackinac on Mackinac Island. Doc will lead things off for the Portland Blue Sox. And he is a doc. He is a chiropractor.
Doc, really one of the folks who was instrumental in creating this club, the Blue Sox of Portland. And as I mentioned, I had the honor of umpiring their first game last year. Got to work with him in getting that event set up as they celebrated the sesquicentennial of Portland, Michigan.
Swing and a miss by Doc. A little ribbing out there on the field. I don't know if that was fair game in the 1800s.
Not serious. It wouldn't have been. You were really expected to cheer for good play on both sides. And if you read the game accounts in the newspapers, usually the first paragraph will talk about how people behaved. Did the spectators cheer for both sides? Were the visiting club welcomed and given appropriate assistance in getting to the field? And then they talked about how the game was played.
And you can go back and look at some of these game recaps from the early 1800s. I think you've done that too, hasn't it?
Absolutely. One of the best ways that we've been able to do more research on how the game was actually played is by looking at actual game accounts. As newspapers have become digitized further and further back, we can read the game accounts. Anyone across the country can access them rather than having to go and look at microfiche.
Doc with a ground ball to short. The throw over to first is caught, and there is one away here in the top of the 6th. Now the man they call Barney will come up next. Portland trying to get something going here. They've played a solid game. It has been a tight game. All the scoring in the first inning. 2-1 game. Fort Mackinac on top. Striker is dead.
Yes, you'll occasionally hear that, the term dead. You might hear a hand dead, meaning a player is out.
Because he made contact and the catcher caught it off the bounce, he is out.
Right, exactly. He just barely tipped it and it landed foul. It was a foul ball. So, but even if it had landed fair or foul, if he'd caught that on one bounce, it would be an out. Those are the most maddening moments when you just barely touch the ball and get put out.
Daddy hacks. Fly ball, center field. He'll play it off the bounce and make the catch. And it's a 1-2-3 inning for Fort Mackinac. So they'll come to the plate in the bottom of the 6th, hoping to add to their 2-1 lead in a game that's been well defended. I just want to use the well in front of everything. It's been a low-scoring game.
It has absolutely been a low-scoring game. And this is, if the score were to end up about here, it's one that'd be written up in the newspapers as being so unusually low-scoring. You know, you mentioned looking at those game accounts. One of the things that's most helpful is that they used to have, because we didn't have the internet, you could write into your newspaper with questions about anything. Who's the fastest racehorse? What boxer has the best record?
Right.
And they would write into the newspapers and ask questions about how to interpret the rules of baseball. And so they would say, here's what happened, here's what the umpire called, was that right? And so we can go back and look at those and understand what issues they were talking about and trying to figure out and where they were getting their answers. And so that's really helpful to see not only how the rules changed, but how the interpretations of the rules changed.
I mean, it's fascinating the way the game has evolved and the way it was created. It's a game with a tremendous amount of history. Now there's one down that started fair.
It went straight down and bounced right in front of home base. Second thing about that is that the ball bounced up and it hit the striker in the leg. And then it bounced off.
Now today's game you'd be out.
Right. But here, because that was unintentional, then it doesn't matter. If he had intentionally put himself in the way of the ball, then he would be interfering and be out. But because that was an unintentional contact with the ball, then it is entirely ball in play.
Now we've got on the on-deck circle, he's got a stogie here looking for his bat. He's found the piece of lumber he wants. Can you play with a cigar?
You know, I'm not sure how that would go.
We'll see what cow pie rules. Cow pie coming down the first base line.
The umpire has called time.
Ladies and gentlemen, not good. Yeah. Mr. Calhoun, what is that ungodly thing in your mouth? Front and center stage, sir. Mr. Pellerito, please come out to the field. Mr. Porter, I think you should be here for this as well.
Now some
Mr. Galloway.
discussion around the
Ladies and
stogie.
gentlemen, as I believe was told at the beginning of this game, there is no smoking in this game. Mr. Galloway, I'm just amazed. I'm disappointed. Words cannot speak to my disappointment in you. Ladies and gentlemen, when something like this and egregious happens, we're going to call on your help. But first, Mr. Calloward or his coaches of his team are going to be fined. That fine will be at least a day's wage. At least a day's wage. In addition, I shall receive my first beer at Mary's Bistro on the house. And now, we're going to determine if Mr. Calloward gets to keep playing. And the way we're going to determine that is Mr. Calloward's going to draft an apology here. Now, nobody knows apologies better than Mr. Pellerito right here. As I said earlier, in his days, he was known for this type of thing. I'm sure it rubbed off, and you're obviously under the influence of Mr. Pellerito. So, Mr. Pellerito, I'm going to take that ungodly thing from you, away from you. I'm going to give it to Mr. Porter to get rid of. Oh, Mr. Pellerito, maybe you'll instruct now Mr. Calloward in the proper way to issue an apology so that Mr. Calloward can indeed return to this game. Ladies and gentlemen, you will make the call.
So apology will be forthcoming now. So far, they're going to be penalized a day's wage, and the umpire gets a beer at the bar.
Maybe demonstrate. It still will be up to Mr. Calloward to do it, but maybe he'll give a short demonstration.
So now comes the begging of forgiveness.
Exactly. So I said this is a community game. This is a time for fun within the community.
Well, Todd Calloward came up with the cigar. They're having a little fun here in the sixth inning of a close ball game. Connor Barnes is over at first base, so they'll issue an apology, and if the crowd accepts it, then he'll continue on with the game. If he doesn't, then maybe he can catch the earlier ferry.
Might be able to. Now, you know, we talked about the baseball history. The game that was first recognized today as the first official game between two clubs. In that club, one of the players swore, and we know that because it was written down in the box score. We know exactly how much he was fined, and we know what he said in that first officially recognized baseball game. So this idea of fines is, in fact, in the record. That could happen.
At least down on his knees, begging for forgiveness so that he can return to the ball game. Today, you can still tell what players say and what they're fined. It's just done through social media.
Exactly. Done a little different. It's not written at the bottom of the score sheet in beautiful script.
Right. Well, Mr. Callowart gets the go-ahead to return to the game. Fort Mackinac with a runner at first. Connor Barnes had a single, and it was a single that wouldn't be legitimate today, but he hit the ball. It went off his leg, was considered fair and in play because he didn't purposely try and run into the baseball. So he's safe at first next to the Giant.
Mm-hmm. You know, there are so many terms that we try to make sure we're, you know, like I said, we try to read those game accounts, and that word safe. We actually didn't yet use that. The opposite of out wasn't safe. The opposite of out was not out. Or the opposite of out might have been in. We might say he was in at second base or in at first base. Occasionally they might say he safely arrived at second base. But the idea of safe being the opposite of out didn't exist yet. The hand signals didn't exist yet.
I'm at full liberty to make this offer to the Portland team. As Mr. Gallagher comes to the plate on this at bat, for every base he touches on this at bat, every base is worth 20% off your first year at Mary's Draft. Every base he touches on this.
See, I don't know if that's a good offer for Portland to get 20% off your beer, because you'd be more apt to give up all 4 bases here to get that 80% off the beer as the pitcher moves up to about 30 feet away from the hill.
Of course, that'd also be 2 runs. So which do they care about more? It's one of those moments in life, I guess.
It is a tight ball game. It is 2-1. Both teams did all their scoring in the first inning. We're in the bottom of the 6th of a game that will be played at 7 innings. Interestingly enough, and you and I talked this afternoon about this, is that back in this era, if you were, say, the home team or the team batting second, as we said, it was decided by a coin flip, not whether you were home or away,
right,
if you batted second. But if you were winning, you still batted in the bottom of the 9th.
That's right. The game, as we said, was a game for sport and exercise, and the idea is that if we end the game after 8.5 innings, then really that's saying that all we care about is knowing who won the game. And so we wanted to to recognize the sport and exercise. You don't want to penalize a team who struck well during the game by denying them the chance to strike well again.
There's one hit hard to center field. This one will be in for a hit. It rolls under the rope. 1 run will score. They're going to wave him home, and Fort Mackinac has their second 2-run homer of the game and has now opened up a 4-1 lead.
A fine strike.
Well, just like that, this game's been blown open.
That's right, relative to where it's been. Now, in this game, though, it's really, you may imagine that it's not a strange thing to see 10 runs up in an inning. I wouldn't.
Well, yeah, this game far from over, far from over. Clay Fuller, the catcher, up at the plate, trying to continue this rally inning for Fort Mackinac. 1 hop and caught, so that'll be an out. And there are 2 away here in the bottom of the 6th.
Now, one other thing to mention about that batting in the 9th. At this point in time, statistics were all kept based on the game. How many runs did you score in a game? And so if you were to lose the chance to bat in the 9th, you're really taking away from your opportunity to work on your stats.
Well, the bounce and the catch does it for action here in the bottom of the 6th. We head to the final inning here on Mackinac Island with Fort Mackinac leading 4-1. We'll take a break and station identification. All right, we get set for action in the top of the 7th. Fort Mackinac leading this one 4-1, and a decision made because pace of play is moving so quickly that instead of the 7 innings they'd agreed to earlier, they're going to try and push and play the full 9. Now, what is dictating the schedule tonight? It is the ferry schedule here on Mackinac Island. The last boat leaves the island at 9 o'clock. And these guys need to catch the boat.
That's right. It's a tricky thing, and there are actually accounts where clubs played, say, 8.5 innings, and then they had to leave to go catch their train. And because they didn't play the bottom of the 9th, they didn't complete the game, and it was ruled a forfeit. So that would be not this kind of a community game,
sure,
of a town game, but they were real serious about playing the full game.
Well, Scoob will lead things off here for Portland. Portland trying to get something going offensively. Scored their lone run in the top of the first. Fort Mackinac has had two two-run homers. And really, since there is no outfield fence and was not at that time, the bunting and the rope they've put out there has really been the only obstacle for the outfield in chasing down some of these hard-hit balls.
Yeah, so think about how that works. This is an amateur game, and everybody is here just to enjoy the game. In 1869, fine catch. In 1869 was the first year that professional baseball was allowed under the rules. 1871 was the first professional league, the National Association of Professional Baseball Players. If you're going to have a professional game, you got to pay your players. Where are you going to get your money? By charging people to see the game. If you're going to charge people to see the game, how do you keep people who didn't pay from seeing the game? You build a fence. And really, that's the point where the idea of a fence came in. Although there were some earlier clubs who had, in New York, who had created fenced fields. But really, it was at that point where you needed to deal with paying players or paying spectators, and then you had to figure out what to do when the ball went over it.
Well, here comes Shoeless. 2 quick outs for Portland. It's just been a well-defended game by Fort Mackinac. There's another one. A high arcer towards short. He'll get underneath it, catch it on the fly, and it is a very quick 1-2-3 top of the 7th for Portland. So Fort Mackinac will come up here in the bottom of the 7th. Craig Bunker expected to lead things off here for the Never Sweats.
So you may notice that when the players hit the ball, it does sound a little different than what you're used to. You're getting a different sound. That's because these balls don't have cork in the middle of them the way a modern baseball does. It's got India rubber, like think pencil eraser rubber. And so it's got more of a bounce sound to it, but also you can see that the ball has a more of a bounce to it when it hits the ground. You would often get some pretty high-scoring games because you've got a field that's not level, you've got a ball with a lot of rubber in it, and then you've got no gloves.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to hold the ball a little earlier and feel it, and I'm like, you know, it's not as hard as today's baseball. I still wouldn't want to try and catch a scorching grounder to third like that one there, and that is a quick out. Might have been more self-defense than actually trying to reel that one in, but either way, a great play.
You know, we mentioned playing without gloves, and gloves did start to come into existence later in the 1860s, but like a glove today is to help you play better, to help you make the catch. A glove then was more like a driving glove, came up to your knuckles, just had some padding in the palms, and its purpose was to keep you from getting hurt, or if you had been hurt, from getting hurt worse. So think about a first baseman taking throws all day. With no gloves, no protection, or a catcher taking swift pitches. They started to wear gloves just to protect their palms. That was the beginning of it. We don't actually have gloves that have like a pocket, anything like a pocket, until around 1906. So that's a long ways in the future from here, almost 50 years.
You think about games at that time, you wanted as little equipment as possible so that everybody could play. Especially if you're playing here on the island. You didn't necessarily have a ton of resources, and you wanted to do something with your free time that was entertaining.
And so a lot of times you would have had somebody in town who was wrapping these balls at home. They would be making them in the evening and stitching them. You'd have a local woodsmith who was, a wood carver who was making the bats, turning them on a lathe. There's only 3 rules about bats. They have to be no more than 2.5 inches at the head. They have to be round, like not flat like a cricket bat. I mentioned cricket was popular at the time. And they have to be all wood. They don't have to be a single piece of wood the way they would be today, but they have to be all wood. You can't have other things in them. There's no length restriction. In 1868, they put in a rule that a bat can't be longer than 42 inches. So think about today. The typical bats may be 34. And so in 1868, they put in the rule that it couldn't be longer than 42. If you read the Major League rules today, they say exactly that. 42 inches is still the length maximum in Major Leagues.
Well, and God bless you if you can swing anything longer than that. You're basically swinging a tree up there.
But think about, why did they put in a maximum? Because people were swinging things longer than that. And catchers were getting destroyed.
That's the thing we haven't really talked too about. Playing catcher in this era. No equipment. You know, the pitching was a little faster then. I mean, it would take an absolute beating on your hands.
Yeah, you really could. Catchers were really often pretty beat up, and they might wear a mouth guard just to protect their teeth. But there's a famous story about there was a train accident, and the people were laying on the ground, and the doctor came and saw a man whose hands were mangled and said, "Oh my goodness, we might have to amputate." And he woke up and said, "No, I'm the catcher for Chicago," because his fingers were so mangled.
No, I'm just a ball player. Now that one down the left field line. That one looks like it's going to be foul, but it's going to bounce and be caught. Now some confusion on the base pass. Does he have to go back or not as they get it to the pitcher? Flip it over to first, so they got to tag him. Giant will put the tag on, and it's a unique double play, if you will.
It is. So today, on a foul ball, a runner has a free return to the base. But here, if the defense can field the ball and get it to the pitcher, and then to get the runner out, the pitcher could go to the base, or they can get it to the pitcher, who then throws it to the base before the runner returns. Then he is out. And so in this case, the runner had actually rounded second. You might have noticed he did go back and touch second. He is required to.
Well, and that was the third out, too. I was waiting to see if they remembered the sharp ground ball to third base. They have. We've got 7 in the books. We're going to play 9 innings here. Fort Mackinac on top of the Portland Blue Sox, 4-1. Welcome back as we get set for the top of the 8th inning. The Fort Mackinac Never Sweats leading the Portland Blue Sox 4-1 here as we play vintage baseball. And joining us now, John Hiller, part of the 1968 Tigers World Series team. John, great to have you with us. How you doing this evening?
Hey, we're doing great. It's always great to get back to the island, and I got an invite 19 years ago, and keep coming back. A lot of great people here, and met a lot of good ball players, and we're happy to see the Portland team come all the way up here to play us today.
Now, I got to tell you, too, you had one of the greatest facial hairs on your baseball card when you were younger. I don't know if they called it the Fu Man, kind of a handlebar mustache there. That was some good-looking facial hair.
Well, it always seems I was clean-shaven, and then I get a little successful, and always tried to have a little fun in the ball field. So every year I think I had a little different mustache or something going on, just keep things interesting.
Well, let's talk about this vintage baseball and Fort Mackinac and why you enjoy playing it, and what your thoughts are on this type of baseball in this era.
Well, I think it's, we've always enjoyed the history of our country, and I grew up in Canada, but I'm in here so long now that I consider this home, and history is important, and to be able to, do something that I made my living at for such a long time, and it was a part of my life, and to be able to continue with something that's great history up here at the fort. Go back to the 1800s that they played a ball game here, and hopefully we can keep it going. And I just feel honored to be part of this game and part of this community for the short time I'm here.
And it's amazing, too, the piece of history that this ground has, that they've been playing baseball here since the late 1800s is really phenomenal.
It is, and it's almost a part of the Field of Dreams type persona that goes on, and just being out here, and you can even think back about how they played after the Civil War and what they looked like and what their characters were like, and I don't know, it's just always given me a thrill to put a uniform on and still play a form of baseball.
Do you still feel like a kid when you get out there and you're able to play in these vintage games and feel the ball?
Well, I do until I have to run. I've had some leg issues. I told them last couple of years they've had a runner for me, and I said, in case somebody knows me out there, I'm not having a runner today. I'm going to run for myself. So
sure, yeah. As we understand it, the rules too, you couldn't run through first base, but they're allowing it today for some of these athletes out here. So they've modified even the vintage rules a little bit.
They have. We put that in a few years back because we've got some elderly ball players, and it makes sense. We're out there to have a good time and not, hopefully not hurt anybody.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your thoughts on what's going on with baseball right now. They're getting ready for a 60-game season, which seems so brief. Everybody always talks about baseball being a marathon, not a sprint, but to go into spring training, then stop down, then start again. My first thought always goes to the pitchers because it takes them a while to get up to speed and get stretched out. And what are your expectations for Major League Baseball headed into this season?
Well, unlike our day back, and I think they've had the benefit of being able to work out year-round. Back in the 60s and early 70s, most of us had a winter job, and we got out of shape, and you'd go to spring training to get into shape and hopefully be ready for the season. So I don't anticipate anybody not being ready because, like I said, they work out year-round, and they knew there was a break, and they knew they had to stay in shape because it was going to start up. I'm just a little disappointed that they didn't settle things, a month or two ago, at least with an idea of a program. And, they were debating between the players and the association and management and ownership. And at least we're going to play some ball, but I sure wish that they had settled things sooner. I do understand Toronto now, Canada's not going to let any players in. So, that's too bad. And that's going to shake things up and even the schedule they set. But I'm looking forward. I love the game. It's too bad everything happened, but we have to deal with it, and we're going to get this behind us and enjoy this great country that we have.
Well, John, we appreciate you joining us. It turned out to be a beautiful night for baseball. I was a little concerned this afternoon with the weather, but it's kind of turned out to be a Chamber of Commerce evening here on the island.
It has. I got chased off the golf course this morning, but I gave up a few holes just hopefully to have this night, and I'd be amiss not to mention that we're very happy that you've come here tonight to television this. It's televised. It's an honor. The guys are thrilled, the players, that this is going to go around the country a little bit, and people are going to get to see what they do here at the fort. And the island is not just all of the downtown and so forth. It's a big part of this is our vintage baseball. So thank you very much for being here.
John, we appreciate it. We hope you got plenty of gas left in the tank, and we'll see you out here next season.
Okay, thank you. Good being with you.
All right, John Hiller, pitcher for the 1968 World Champion Tigers. And the Blue Sox there with a great defensive play. As we're moving along here in action in the bottom of the 8th inning.
They're in the Portland half of the inning. Shoeless was put out at first, and then we had a bound catch in center field. Giant got a single, but in the process got a hamstring pull. So we allowed a substitute runner, which put Porkrind, who had just made an out there in center field, to go in to run, and then Jeter flew out to right field. Now, at the start of this inning, you may have overheard that Ken Fagan was actually batting even though he finished the last inning. Because what happened was there was a foul ball, and the foul ball was caught for an out, and then Fagan was put out in returning, Dominic Miller was put out in returning to first base on the foul ball. Fagan I've got my names wrong, but
Ken Fagan had hit the ball.
Fagan had hit the ball, and Tyler McLean had been put out. And so Fagan led off again, because the rule is that the player leads off the inning who follows whoever made the last out, not whoever was at bat when the last out was made. And so because the player made the last out at first base was McLean, and Fagan followed McLean, Fagan struck again.
Part of the fascination of vintage baseball, and I'm glad you have us here. You're with us to help keep track of that, Marcus, because it's the rules are very different in that era. All right, we're through another full inning here. Fort Mackinac still leading this ball game by a score of 4-1. We'll come back. I think we're set for the final inning of action here at Mackinac Island. Tom Helmer, Marcus Dixon with you. We'll be right back. Tom Helmer and Marcus Dixon with you here on Mackinac Island as we get set for the top of the 9th inning of the vintage baseball game played here at Fort Mackinac. It's been a pretty tightly contested game. Fort Mackinac on top by a score of 4-1 as we start action here in the top of the 9th inning. The old coach will get things started here for Portland. Portland needs a rally here in the 9th inning. As we discussed before, in that era too, just because Fort Mackinac was winning doesn't mean you'd play 8.5. You played out the full game.
Exactly right. The rules say that you play 9 full innings, that the game ends when both teams have had an even number of times at the strikers line. So we will play those complete 9 innings. And it would have been absolutely normal for them to do that and for the team to put up a few extra runs, not because it was seen as ungentlemanly. What was ungentlemanly was to treat your opponent like a child and not play your best against them all the time. Not running up the score. Well, that wasn't seen as ungentlemanly. It was treating your opponent as if they were not an adult.
Now their coach had fouled one off. The catcher, Clay Fuller, went for the bounce but missed it, so he'll come back and strike at that one again, if you will. Now, did they have walk-offs in that era? Now, if Portland were to rally here and Fort Mackinac came back and passed them back up score-wise, would there be a walk-off in that era, or would they just continue to play it out till you get the 3 outs?
You play it out. Coach to first base.
Well, nice hustle down the first base line, so now it'll be up to Doc to try and keep this thing going.
I will say it is a little bit difficult when you've been playing a very tight game the whole way, and the team at bat in the bottom of the 9th scores a go-ahead run. To go back out and play those last couple of outs after that's a hard thing to do, but they absolutely would have finished the game.
Tyler McLean hit a 2-run homer in the first for Fort Mackinac. Here's one popped to first. That'll bounce, take a couple bounces. The striker is dead, but old coach moves over to second base. So there's one away. Runner at second. The man they call Barney will come up next for Portland. As I mentioned, 2-run homer in the first by Tyler McLean, and then a 2-run homer by Robert Chambers in the 6th has been the scoring for Fort Mackinac. There's one. Nice strike to center field. High bounce, though, for the out. And coach will move over to third. So runner at that. He's going to try and get away here on the loose ball because Fuller, the catcher, had been running down the third baseline. And with some nice hustle, it's suddenly a 4-2 ball game. And the entire Portland bench will come over to give him high fives.
So they would, you might hear that they're calling for a cheer right now, and that would have been a common thing, to offer a cheer. It's all at the end of the game. It would be common that each team would offer a cheer for their opposing club and thank them for the match.
Daddy Hacks, the leadoff hitter for Portland, up at the plate. He'll try and keep them alive here in the 9th. 4-2 game now.
So I think what we've seen today is really an American exercise. This is 2 communities coming together, playing a game. Really, of course, they're keeping score, and they're going to write down who won. But what really matters is that they had fun together, they had exercise together, they met the challenge of playing the game, and they enjoyed the time out. And that's really what these communities would have been doing.
And I got to tell you, Marcus, with the way 2020's gone, it's just great to be out in fresh air, people out here talking, and to see a live sporting event.
It has absolutely been a great opportunity. Now well,
that's a fair ball ripped into the trees. That'll be a ground rule double for Scoob, but that will bring in a run, and suddenly we've got a 4-3 ball game with 2 outs, a runner at second, and Classic coming up to the plate. Well, we got a nice little rally here in the 9th. Makes it a 1-run game. Classic has had a tough day at the plate. Hasn't gotten on safely yet, but with a hit here, should be able to score the runner from second and tie this ball game. Definitely renewed energy on the Blue Sox bench, as just about all of them are standing. And he wants to make sure he gets his right pitch too. He's got time here to size it up.
Exactly. Especially, those strikes do exist in the rules. They're very, very rarely called. There's no called balls yet in the rules. So he's going to be able to take a good look and see what he wants. And I think he got what he wanted, but it didn't go where he wanted it.
Well, he's going to be safe at first as no one could get to the ball as it had a backspin on it. Fell short. So now you got runners at first and third. And Schulis is going to come up with a chance to tie this ball game or possibly give the Blue Sox the lead.
So one of the things that happens with that ball that has all that rubber in it is if you hit it straight on, it'll fly. But if you get off, it'll do exactly what we just saw.
Shallow hit to right, takes a high bounce. It is caught. And that'll be the third out here in the top of the ninth. And Portland will come up short in the inning. It is 4-3. But as we stated in the rules, they'll go out and play defensively. So all that's in question here is the final score, but our winner is going to be Fort Mackinac.
That's exactly right.
Again, listen, as tightly as it was played, they gave us a bit of a thrill there in the ninth. We tried. Doc says we tried. Hey, it was a close one. It's technically not over yet.
Well, and they would be, they would absolutely be doing this. They would be wanting to play their best, and both sides would want to do that. And so that's what we appreciate, is that they're playing the full game with a good spirit.
So here we go, the final half inning of baseball here at Fort Mackinac on Mackinac Island, wedged in between the upper and lower peninsula of Michigan. It's been a beautiful evening for baseball. All that's in question now is the final score. Fort Mackinac is going to come away with the win.
You know, I'm not sure that I would say, given that rally, that they were never sweating. I think that they might have been sweating a little bit there, but they did put it together there at the end. Nice play by the coach to make that play at first.
The Giant hobbling a little bit there, had to go down and get that one. Everybody with smiles on their face. Well, John Hiller coming up to the plate. We talked to him in the 8th inning. World Series champ. See if he could step into one here. Well, that one lined towards short. He's going to have to at least run this one out. The throw over to first will be off the bag.
It's having Giant with his 6'9" over there was a good person to stop that from going into the crowd.
Well, they're giving him plenty of target. Giant's limping around a little bit. He's sore. We know he's got a bad wing. That's why he plays first base.
Right.
He's 6'9". Gives his infield a nice, big, solid target. So Connor Barnes will come up. Sharp grounder through the left side of the infield. Throw over to second will be in time, so there's a force out at second, and there's 2 away.
So our umpire today, John Soma, Cow Pie, formerly with the Rochester Grangers Baseball Club. We've appreciated him calling a fair game. And at the conclusion of the game, usually the teams would offer cheers to the umpire as well.
Well, it's a fun game to watch if you've never watched vintage baseball. It's certainly an enjoyable way to spend, well, I would say less than 2 hours.
Sure.
They played nine innings in 90 minutes.
This one moved fast. But no, it really is an enjoyable game to watch. And people who come to see it for the first time say, you know, that's baseball, but not quite. And it's really just baseball, but not yet.
Well, a ground ball through the right side. Second base has it, flips it over to the Giant. That'll be the third and final out. So it was a greatly contested game. Fort Mackinac is going to come out on top thanks to a pair of 2-run homers, one by Tyler McLean and one by Robert Chambers. And that'll bring a conclusion. That'll bring a conclusion to this ball game. Well, this is, if you're first time watching vintage baseball, did you get a good feel for how it's played?
I think you did. You got a good spirit of a community game. These teams have both enjoyed the game and enjoyed the play. Of course, we have other clubs that might play more regularly, that might play 15, 20, 30 games in a season. These gentlemen play 1 or 2 games a season. So you might see a little bit different play, but they certainly had a great community feel of vintage baseball and recreating that game of the 19th century.
And they're going to call the winner now.
Fort Mackinac never sweats. 4 aces. Portland Blue Sox, 3 aces.
The official announcing of the victory by Fort Mackinac. We're going to take a break. We'll be back to wrap things up here on Mackinac Island. Well, welcome back. Final score today from Mackinac Island. Fort Mackinac never sweats 4 aces. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, 4 aces, 4 runs. Yep.
And the Portland Blue Sox 3 aces or 3 runs. It was a tight ball game, well-played game. And for those getting their first chance to watch vintage baseball, I think it's a lot of fun to watch.
It is. And what you're going to see, what's happening right now is that the captains of each club are going to be offering speeches of gratitude and then offering a cheer from their club for the opposing club. That would have been a normal thing to have happen, to thank the other clubs. So you hear they're giving hurrahs for the opposing clubs. And that's part of the way the game was played. You were expected to recognize good play, to play in a gentlemanly way, to play your best, but never to take an ungentlemanly advantage. And I think that's something that we could see a little more of in our sports and in our life today.
I agree with you, Marcus. I mean, a lot of this could translate into any sport today.
Absolutely. And just you want to always play at your very best. You want to play always within the rules. It's very common if an umpire were to say that runner is out, for the player to say, no, sir, my foot had come off the base. He shouldn't be out. Usually the umpire doesn't make the call. That the players on the field are expected to make the call, and only if they can't decide between themselves, they would go to the umpire. They're expected to be honest. And if a player wasn't, you wouldn't want him on your club anymore.
Well, John Soma, our umpire, final tip of the cap from him, the man they call Cow Pie, did a great job umpiring today's game. Again, the final score here from Mackinac Island. Fort Mackinac never sweats 4, Portland Blue Sox 3. For Marcus Dixon and our entire crew, I'm Tom Helmer, wishing you a good evening from Mackinac Island here in the state of Michigan. Have a fantastic evening.